Hello, everybody. This is Noah and John, and we are from UrbanDigs. And today we're going to be talking Manhattan. John, we're going right to the attorney route. That's where all the frontline data is. And we got Hal Coopersmith of Coopersmith and Coopersmith. Okay, he's like a blacksmith out there. All right, with what's going on, and we're going to learn some information. We're going to go into some policy changes, what's going on, things that agents kind of need to know, as well as what's going on in the market.
He is putting the shoes on the galloping stallion that is the Manhattan real estate market. And with that,
I got to be honest with you, I did not think you were going to go there, John. But that's why you're here. Thank you for that excellent.
Gotta nail blacksmith references when you
whatever that was. All right, John. Hal, thank you for being here. Thank you for being patient while John and I play around here. Listen, let's start high level. All right, agents are listening to this. They got consumers that want to know, is the rental market really on fire? Is the sales market really on fire? Like the data says, what's going on?
No, John, thanks for having me. And again, like you said, I'm just hammering away over here, but the market is certainly going on strong. On the residential side, we've seen a lot of activity, a lot of contracts requiring to be signed very quickly. There's no more COVID discount. We are seeing a lot of volume. And on the commercial side, we're seeing a pickup of activity, and we're talking about rentals and residential rentals. And we're certainly seeing a pickup of residential rentals, people wanting to come back to New York City and signing those leases. You may have seen an article in the Wall Street Journal. Tenants are looking to lock in longer term residential leases to take advantage of the market while it's still soft. But you can expect as New York comes back that market will tighten up. And important things need to be done on the landlord side, which we're going to talk about if you do want to raise that rent for your tenants.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And that's one of the things that we realized and we actually talked about is that, you know, at its nadir, at its lowest point, the rents were down, the concessions were high, but the length on a lot of these leases was very short. And I think a lot of landlords were very wary about going anything past a year, maybe 2 years if you're really, really lucky and you really pushed a deal. But generally speaking, most of these leases were short. So I can imagine that a lot of folks are really looking to say, all right, well, okay, maybe the market's come back a little bit, and it might be time to lock some of these down.
And for leases that weren't short term, a lot of units were shelved and weren't even put on the market.
Yeah, we saw that as well. We did a piece on sort of landlord warehousing, and the idea is that they're trying to control that supply and demand and sort of, you know, refocus the. Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
No, I was just gonna ask Hal, are you seeing a lot of 2-year leases right now, though?
Not at this point, but you know, tenants are looking to take advantage of the market while it's still soft, and it's still a landlord-tenant decision. And concessions are still there, but tenant, landlords are hesitant to lock in a longer term.
Right, but in general, sorry, John, one last second. In general, the concessions, are they fading away from where they were 6 months ago? Like, give me some sense of the depth of those concessions today versus, I guess, recent past.
What I'm seeing is that certainly the concessions are fading away as compared to 6 months ago when it was January during the height of COVID. That's when you would get the most concessions. And right now, you still need to attract some tenants, but for the most part, people are not entirely in the city right now, and I do expect to come back stronger starting in the fall.
Good stuff. Let me shift it to sort of on the broker side of the equation, Hal. And there's been a lot of talk about, can brokers collect commission from the tenants? Can they not collect? And I'm just curious, where are the laws right now for New York City, New York State, in terms of what can real estate brokers expect when they're doing rental deals?
It's a very good question, John, and there's been a lot of confusion in the market about that. New York State passed the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, and the New York State Department of State provided an interpretation of the law that prohibited brokers from collecting commissions. There was a lawsuit about that, so that interpretation was put on hold. That lawsuit was resolved in favor of brokers being able to collect commissions. You may have also heard that there's legislation to prevent tenant brokers from collecting commissions. That has not passed the Assembly or the Senate. It's not law yet. So right now, brokers who are representing tenants can collect commissions.
Interesting stuff.
Right. Yeah, I know that was a big worry that was lingering around for a while. What about tenants that are paying the condo and co-op fees? Or should the landlord pay those fees? Like what do you think should be going on?
That's a great question, Noah, because there was certainly a lot of confusion around that. And some of the landlords that we represent own in co-ops and condos. And so how much can a landlord collect for a credit check or anything else like that? Right now, a lot of the buildings have certainly wised up, and they're transferring all those fees to the landlord side. So an application fee, a move-in fee, they'll have the shareholder or the owner pay those fees. From a broker side, if a co-op or condo is collecting a fee from a tenant, the broker has a safe harbor. So it's somewhat of an unresolved part of the law at this point. But if a broker collects those fees, there is a safe harbor, and the broker's not doing anything wrong.
Interesting stuff. And so does that mean there are different requirements then if you're a landlord in a co-op or a condo?
Well, John, as the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act affected landlords across New York State, large and small. So there's certainly a compliance aspect for larger landlords. They have all these units and they're developing their systems to make sure that they send out non-renewal notice, rent increase notices, performing the walkthrough and returning the security deposit at the end of the lease.
Mhm.
And those apply to small landlords as well. And so for the individual condo co-op owner, they have to keep track of these deadlines as well. And there's a lot to keep track of. For example, we kind of alluded to this earlier. If an owner does not send out a rent increase notice, they can't increase the rent by more than 5% per year. So
Right.
let's say that landlord either did that concession, last year, or in addition to removing the concession, wants to increase the rent, they won't be able to do that with the same tenant if they haven't sent out that rent increase notice. Same thing goes for a co-op or condo where there's a restriction on how long an owner can rent for. If an owner doesn't send a non-renewal notice, that tenant or subtenant in the case of a co-op can stay beyond the length of the lease until the owner sends a non-renewal notice. And that could obviously subject the owner, if they're in a co-op, to fees and penalties. And so we've worked very closely with our landlords and property managers who we work with. We've developed a proprietary system called RezCue, which keeps track of all the rentals, informs landlords, brokers, and property managers of these requirements as they come up, and make sure that they don't miss a deadline.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it could be a real disaster. I mean, if you're renting to somebody in a co-op and the co-op only lets you rent for, say, 2 years, and your tenant doesn't move out and they stay, I mean, I can imagine that it's co-op. And I guess it sounds like there's no exceptions. Is that correct? Like if you're a landlord, regardless of the nature of the property, whether it's a co-op, condo, multifamily house, and you're just renting one of the rooms at one of the apartments, there is no exceptions. Is that correct?
There's no exception if you are renting out your own apartment. It applies to landlords large and small. And so it's certainly a big burden for small landlords, for individual owners. And we recognize that problem and wanted to help landlords, brokers, property managers follow the law, make sure they're not missing the deadlines.
Yeah.
Hey, Hal, that notice that needs to go out. I guess I'm just thinking about that owner of the condo that is renting their place and may not know all these things, or the agent that may not know these things. Let's make them aware. How is there a timeline there? Like it must be sent within 30 days, 60 days of lease expiration or something?
It depends on how long the tenant has been in the premises. So if a lease, like one of those short-term leases you were talking about, it's less than a year, the owner has to send it at least 30 days before the expiration of the lease. If it's 1 year to up to 2 years, it's 60 days before the end of the lease. And if the tenant's been in there for more than 2 years, it's 90 days before the end of the lease.
Okay,
and so it depends on, depends on how long
So it sounds like you do have to keep track of a ton of stuff.
I was just going to say, how the hell? I mean, this RezCue system, is this what you built to keep track of all this?
We built it particularly with the small landlord, small property owner in mind, what I've been trying to evangelize is you have to dump the Excel spreadsheet, the Google sheet for renewal. If you don't keep track, it's hard enough to keep track of a renewal on its own. Now with the requirements of the law, there can be a lot more consequences for failing to follow the law. And if, what I've been saying to brokers is if you're maybe rentals aren't a primary part of your business and you want to maintain that relationship with an owner, you're not doing them any favors if you're simply keeping track of the renewals on your own. And if rentals are a primary part of your business and you are a rental broker, this is a great system to add value and sustain that relationship with your landlord clients and make sure that they're keeping track of the deadlines.
That's cool stuff. Congratulations. Sounds like an interesting thing. Let me just, if I could shift it for a second, because I know just last week, I think it was, there were some changes to the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act that involves co-ops, and whether or not co-ops for owners who don't own the property outright, they own shares. If the co-op, the corporation could say withhold more than say a month of maintenance for escrow or some things like that. I'm wondering if you could sort of walk us through what has changed. I know it hasn't been signed yet, but what's coming down the pipeline essentially?
It's a great question, John. So the law was passed in June 10th or 11th by the Senate, and it hasn't been signed by the governor yet, but it was pretty much unanimous. So everyone expects it to be signed. And co-ops are included under the Housing and Stability Tenant Protection Act because it's a landlord-tenant relationship. So the sweeping reform of the HSTPA included co-ops, and owners and co-ops and property managers said, we understand the protections that you're trying to offer to residential tenants, but it doesn't necessarily apply to someone who owns a co-op unit, who's an owner or shareholder in a building, essentially capping the late fees, requiring a security deposit, because there are very well may be legitimate reasons for a co-op to have higher fees, require security, particularly when someone's going to own the shares and live there. So instead of late fees being capped at $50 or 5% of the rent, that has now increased to 8%, or might increase to 8% of the maintenance without a cap of $50, can require the security deposit from someone who's buying into a co-op, and a lot of the other, those are the main ones, but there are certainly a lot of other provisions that apply. But what I do want to highlight is these only apply to owner shareholders of the building. So what we're talking about in terms of subletting a co-op still applies. And if you're an owner subletting your co-op to a tenant, you still have to follow the requirements of the HSTPA as it's written, and there's no exception there.
Wow. Okay.
That was a good question there, Johnny. Hey, Hal, can landlords charge for pet deposits or prepayment of a rent in a year in advance?
It's a good question. So that's exactly a follow-up from John's question, which is you can't collect a higher security deposit, you can't prepay rent. So anyone who's renting out their apartment, either a condo co-op or a rental unit, still has to still can't collect a pet deposit, can't accept a prepayment of rent, can't accept more than 1 month of security, and that law is still in effect.
Okay.
Interesting stuff.
I mean, just a lot of stuff here, Johnny.
It is. And so I just like to, we've been talking a lot about landlords, tenants, things like that. I'd like to shift the conversation up a little bit and just talk about right now, right now here it is, it's the middle of June. The sales market remains on fire for both Manhattan and Brooklyn. The rental market seems to be picking up off its lows. We have a lot of tenants, as you mentioned, moving in the city. And I'm curious, when you do deals with your clients, what's the mood? What's the mood against the buyers, the sellers? The sellers think it's a great time. They think
what's the urgency?
Yeah, what's the urgency? How are folks feeling out there on the front lines?
People are certainly feeling the urgency on the buy and sell, particularly on the buy side. I've been working with clients who have seen a lot of properties. They have accepted offers, and need a deal done quickly, due diligence completed, a transaction completed very, very quickly. It certainly feels like a seller's market, and that you guys probably know better that there will be upward price increases as that follows, but it does seem like there's a lot of urgency. I've even started working with clients. They had an accepted offer and someone comes up over the top with them as we're working together at one day after that offer is accepted. And that's happened more than a few times.
Yeah, I think it was last year about this time that we were talking to attorneys, and they were talking about how they're trying to get clients out of contracts. They're working on renegotiating, and now we're talking about best and finals are not necessarily the final.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting time. I was just on, Phil Horgan had this Clubhouse chat, and a bunch of industry pros were there. Fritz Freegan was one of them, and he talked about the surge that we just had over the last 3 months. He's like, the companies are starting to require people to come back to work. That there's been like a 50% requirement, and maybe that has led to the last 3 months of record activity because there's just been a rebalancing. And the argument was, I think there's going to be another one, because there's going to be another wave of offices requiring either 75% to 100%, whatever, it's in 1 or 2 steps. And that's going to require a whole load of people just to say, all right, I got to come back. So he's like, when he looks forward, I see that these waves, almost like a tsunami coming, and we may be in a downtrend, we may go down, but then there's gonna be another wave, and then there's gonna be another wave. And then I was on an Element call, and Doug Williford, sales manager at Tribeca at Element, said the exact same thing. And these guys were not part of the same conversation. So it's like, I'm wondering if that is something that not many people are talking about, and it's starting to get a narrative right over here, the move back wave.
Our office is in Midtown Manhattan, and when we just moved, and certainly have seen more people on the streets as I'm walking around town, and coming to the office. It's certainly not at full occupancy, but I can certainly see as companies require people to come back, probably after the summer. Banks are in the news requiring people to come back. If you can go to a restaurant, you can come to the office. And so I certainly anticipate those waves as well.
Interesting. Let me ask you how, and this is not something we talked about beforehand, because sometimes we go over these things, but do you guys do any on business on the commercial side? Because I'm very curious about what, ground floor retail is one of the things we've been talking about.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to that coming. I'm just curious, like, what are your commercial landlords, what are your commercial tenants thinking these days?
We do commercial leasing, and we have seen offers go out on retail, and they're trading at a discount from where they were pre-COVID. Seen a fair amount of percentage rent deals, and landlords working with tenants on that front. And on the office side, we see tenants and landlords making deals and bringing people into the office. Maybe it's not immediate, anticipated for summer or fall, or just a renewal, but that office activity is starting to come back. And I think that people will come back to the offices. And you're also seeing from Generalized data an increase in retail sales just across the country. And so you can certainly expect that to come to New York, and restaurants popping up because now they have their choice of environment. And on the retail side, everything's going to trade at a certain price. So, it was unfortunate. We were working through a lot of lease modifications during the pandemic. Now activities coming up, and it should be an exciting time for the city as those waves come in.
John, that was a great question. Hal, that's an awesome answer. I love hearing it. And John, we talk about this all the time. It feels like it's starting to happen. We talk about the ground floor retail tentacle coming back, the commercial space tentacle coming back, the rental sector tentacle coming back. And when we're talking about how it's not going to happen all at once, it's kind of going to be like over time. It's just a beautiful thing to see. And this is why I think this market has legs. And Hal, you're 100% right. Price action looking forward, it's nothing but positive. The problem is we might have a little bit of a slowdown from record activity. But the price action is just going to be positive for the next 6+ months. Yeah.
It'll be great to see the city come back. It was obviously a tough
Yeah.
time for a lot of people, and I think everyone
seeing it.
who cares about the city is really happy to see the activity and be together.
Yeah, look, and if I don't mind, Hal, could you give us a little insight? Because you mentioned that you're seeing some rents trading at a discount. I'm just curious, do you have a generalized level for that discount? Because and the second, the
On
follow-up
commercial?
on that, yeah, on the commercial side. The second question, and this is a two-part question. So generalized discounts, part one. Part two is like, are these landlords, is this a very idiosyncratic thing, or is this sort of, depending on location?
I think it's somewhat idiosyncratic. I don't want to generalize for you guys, and I think it is important to break it out by asset class. It's easy to toss out 15 to 20% as a discount, but I think it really becomes more nuanced when on the office side. It becomes more nuanced when you're working through what is there, and whether or not lower end office will be absorbed or transferred to a different asset class, which is certainly what a lot of people are talking about, and whether or not hotels of a certain asset class become residential. And so I don't want to generalize in terms of what discounts are, but I think that probably a few years from now, I don't think that they'll be, we'll be looking back at this time to say those were the days for
Yeah.
discounts.
Unbelievable.
Great.
That's
great
the way it works.
talking.
Hal Coopersmith of Coopersmith and Coopersmith. This was fantastic. A lot of nuggets and gems of information here, and I really appreciate you sharing this and taking the time. That is John Walkup. I am Noah Rosenblatt. We are both of UrbanDigs. This has been Talking Manhattan, and we'll catch you next time.